Hi, friends. It's Kayla Moran, and welcome back to the Let's Get Candid podcast. How's everybody doing today? Happy Thursday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever day or time it is that you're listening. So happy to be back on the mic with you guys. Happy almost Thanksgiving and happy almost 27th birthday to me. I can't believe that I turned 27 on Sunday in just 4 days. When I started this podcast when I was 23, and all of the growth and lessons and opportunities that have come because of this podcast, or maybe in spite of this podcast or anything like that. It's just really cool to be able to celebrate another birthday and share it all with you guys. I have a really exciting episode for you, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet because it's a long one and it's a really, really good one. I'm talking to my friend Sophie. She works in New York City and she had a background in public relations, and now she works in the influencer marketing side. And we talk all about what made her want to go to the big city, growing up in Kentucky and going to college in New Orleans, and how she got started in the PR world and how she transitioned from PR to influencer marketing and what the difference is and how the skills that she learned in one helps her in the other. And then we also really dive into the importance of being friends with your team members and your boss and how to bridge that gap between friendship and employer-employee relationship, especially when you're kind of all in the same age group and you probably all go out to the same bars and you hang out in the same places, and maybe you guys are friends outside of work, or maybe the client that you're working with is someone that you know personally that you knew from college and now they're on the brand side, and how you kind of maintain those relationships, why it's so important to build relationships and to maintain relationships, and how relationships are the foundation of this industry that we're all in or aspiring to be in. And it was such a great conversation. We had so much fun. And I honestly, we could have stayed talking for hours. I wish we had more time, but I hope that I get to meet her soon in New York. And I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. I wrote my birthday letter, my annual letter to myself, written as if it's an advice column for somebody else. Very Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City, her sex column. Kind of similar, but we're not talking about sex. We're talking about self-love and compassion in this one. If you want to go check it out, be sure to check out my newsletter linked in the description. And I hope you guys subscribe and follow along because there is going to be a lot more content coming on my newsletter and on my social media. I'm feeling so inspired. I went to a community workshop yesterday, community building, hosted by Breaking Glass, which is a female entrepreneurship community membership here in Miami. And I'm just left feeling so inspired and excited to create content again. And today I just got so many messages about how relatable I am from colleagues, from friends, from clients, how important it is that I share the good, bad, and the ugly, the nitty gritty, not just the really aesthetic side of things. And I'm honest about the fact that I got all dressed up and went to this event and I forgot to take pictures because I was just so in the moment, or I was running late because of a client, both which happened yesterday. And I'm off to an event tonight because it is officially event season in Miami. Art Basel starts up in 2 weeks in December, but this week there is just a ton of events because of the holidays next week. But we are in social season and it's so much fun. I love being in Miami during this time of year, but of course can't wait to go to Europe in a few weeks, which we'll talk more about in next week's episode. So if you like this one, please leave a rating and review. Please subscribe to the show, share with a friend, tag us as you're listening. Let me know who you want to see next, what topics you want me to cover in season 3 coming in 2025. I will see you guys all in next week's episode. Meet Sophia. Sophie, what's something that people wouldn't know about you just from following you?
Oh, that's a fun question. Something that people wouldn't know about me from following me is that, well, maybe you would know this, but maybe not right off the bat, but I am a twin. I have a twin brother who lives in Chicago. And then my older brother and sister are also boy-girl fraternal twins. So there are 2 sets of twins in my family, which is my favorite fun fact. It's the one that I grew up using whenever anybody asks us a question like that. It's just my go-to, but we're all super close. My older brother lives here in New York, which is really nice. And yeah, my twin is out in Chicago. So that's my
That's so cool. I've always wanted to be a twin or have have twins. That's something that is I don't know. I grew up in elementary school. There was a set of triplets. And I just thought it was so cool to have a built-in best friend. That to me seems so cool because my younger brother's 3.5 years younger than me. So we're close now as adults, but as kids, we were always, I was in high school, he was in middle school, I was in college, he was in high school. We were never super close until now, but that would be so cool.
No, that's how it was with my older siblings as well, because they're 6 years older than my twin and I. So same as you, like when we were in lower school, they were like in college and they were like, who are these? Like we were just obnoxious to them. We were just like the annoying little siblings. We didn't get along that well when we were younger because that age gap is just so much bigger. And then as you got older, we've all like, become very, very close. But Philip and I, my twin, are like, we were inseparable. We went to the same college. We actually lived next door to each other in college because we shared a car. So our junior and senior year, we were living in this like house that split into two different apartments. So I was on one side with my friends and he was on the other side with his friends. And it was honestly so fun. We just like hung out all the time. But it is like a built-in, like I just always had, and we would go to all the camps together. Like we just did everything together. My parents just like stuck us in any sort of like activity or thing that they could like pawn us off on, especially during the summers. And we would just do it together. So I just like never really knew life without him. So moving to New York was crazy because that was my first time like being separated from him like as an adult or throughout my whole life. And when he moved to Chicago, I moved to New York, and that was like a tough adjustment for me to not just like be with my twin all the time,
Yeah. You said like your oldest brother is in New York with you. Where's his twin? And like, are you closer to him now because your twin's in Chicago? Like, how's the dynamic between the four of you guys kind of changed because of that?
Kind of. I think I just have like such different relationships with my older siblings. Like, because my older sister is my only sister, we like my relationship with her is very different than my relationship with my older brother. I think like if they're going to listen to this, they're going to imagine I'm going to like get in trouble for this, but I would say that I'm probably like closer to my twin just because we grew up together. Like my relationship with him is just it's like, yeah, it's just different. But I've loved having my older brother here because, that's like a special bond that we then have. We've like have this mutual connection of like being in New York, and he knows all my New York friends, and my sister has a baby, so she doesn't come up to New York as often. So it's just kind of like a different relationship, but like I talk to my sister about stuff that I wouldn't talk to my brothers about, because she's like my only sister, and I'm not gonna like talk about dating and things like that with my brothers. So it's just different. Like, but I would say like if I, had to pick, which I would never do, I would say I'm closer to Philip, my twin, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like you guys literally have done everything together, and it's probably good for you guys like in college to have that slight separation. Like you're still next to each other, but you're not living together anymore. So you guys start having a little bit of that individuality before you ultimately ended up not being in the same city or state. Like
Yes,
what was that adjustment like? Of like you said, it was like a bit of an adjustment, but like, when your friends are all the same friend group and like everybody's like really close, like, you've told me before, like you had been to New York, you interned there, like you had like people already up there probably. Did he know anybody in Chicago? Like what was that transition period like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, I would have loved to have lived in the same city. And honestly, maybe one day we will. Like, I do hope that eventually we will find each other back in the same city. But I knew that I was going to go to New York, and I knew Philip would not go to New York. Like it was not where he wanted to be. He wanted to stay in education. He went to Loyola Chicago to get his master's in education. And he's now a principal of a K-8 school in Chicago. And he's been there for like 8+ years since we graduated. He went to Chicago and I went to New York, and we both kind of just settled there. For me, I just knew like my job, what I wanted to do, which was, PR or marketing or communications, that was all going to be like better suited to a city like New York. And I just always knew that I wanted to be here. So like you mentioned, I did intern here in the summers when I was in college. My aunts both live up here in Westchester, like outside of the city. My grandfather was in Connecticut. So it just like, I've, extended family in Philly. It just like this area just felt, like it made the most sense for me and for my career. And of course, my older brother was here in Brooklyn. So, it was never like a conversation where Philip and I were like, okay, like, are we going to try to go to the same place after graduation, like live in the same city? He has tried ever since we've graduated. So since 2016, he has tried to get me to move to Chicago. And at one point when I first moved here, I was like, oh, I'll just stay in New York for a couple years. And then like, maybe I'll go to Chicago. So like my deadline for him when I was younger was always like mid to late 20s, like maybe I'll move to Chicago. And he like held on to that. And then of course my mid to late 20s came, and I was like, I'm not leaving New York. Like I'm not going to Chicago. Yeah. was like maybe 30. And then my 30th came and I'm like, I'm certainly actually now even more sure than I ever was before that I'm like not moving to Chicago. So I think he's like given up, but he tries. Like you have to give him, credit for 8 years of just like constant trying to get like one of us, any of his siblings. He'll take any of us. Like he pretends he wants me, but I swear he would be happy with like any of my siblings, just somebody there with him in Chicago.
Yeah, it's probably nice for him to know like you guys are all close in the sense of like proximity, and he's kind of like, guys, I'm all the way over here, like come hang out with me.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you were born in Kentucky, so and you have a lot of family in like New England and like New York. Like how come, like why were you guys, I don't know, that's such a weird question to ask. Like how come you guys were in Kentucky when like your whole family is like somewhere else?
No, it is funny. We're not like Southern. I don't have an accent, I don't think. Like I don't sound like I'm from the South.
No, you don't.
Okay, good. I just needed to confirm that. My parents are all from, like I said, they're from up here. My dad's from Philly and my mom's from Connecticut. I was actually, all four of us were actually born in New Orleans. And that's obviously where I went to school. I went to Loyola New Orleans, but we left when I was like 2. So I consider myself born and raised in Kentucky. But my parents both lived there for like 10 plus years. They had all 4 of us down there. My mom went to Tulane, so she was in school down there. They're both teachers. So they met at Country Day, which is a small school in New Orleans and Metairie. And we were all born there. And then my dad got a job opportunity in Kentucky in Lexington, which is why we moved there and then ended up just like staying there. I don't think they like anticipated that we would stay in Lexington. Like that wasn't where they're like their forever place. But he just got an opportunity. And then when you have that many kids, like they had 4 of us, like it's really hard to continue to uproot like us that much. And we had just built like lives there and our friends were there. And I just think that they felt bad, like to uproot us later in life. So they just stayed until they retired. And now they're still in Lexington because my sister's still there and she has her baby who's 6 months old. So like they're new grandparents and they just want to like be around the baby, obviously, as much as they can. So yeah, we're not like Southerners, I don't think. Like I am from there, but yeah, I feel like I love Lexington and I loved growing up there, but I'm not like a true like Kentuckian, which maybe would be like, I'd get in some trouble for saying that with some of my friends in Kentucky, but
yeah. No, I think that's the coolest thing. And I feel like as we go older, like our generation is really going to be the ones where we don't tend to stay necessarily where we grew up. We go off to school and some people go back, like I came back, but
yeah,
you guys aren't really going to do that. And I feel like it's a weird thing. Like, our family's going to start being a lot more spread out than like the same, like multiple generations in the same place. And like your parents kind of did the same thing too for work. And that's something that I've kind of like grappled with in the recent years is, I can work from anywhere. So, and I have friends from so many different places because of school or because I travel and I meet people and like work. So I want to be based in Miami long term, but like nothing's keeping me here right this second. So like, and like I'm dating around, like I don't necessarily date here either. So it's like, I'm curious like where that'll lead me, like to have a family or like, that's so interesting. Like, do you see yourself raising a family in New York, or like when that time comes, like would you go back to where your parents are? Like, what do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I don't know either. And I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, I don't really know. Like, I never thought I would be in New York forever. Like, that was not my end goal. When I first told Philip that maybe Chicago, like I meant that, like seriously, when I was fresh out of school, I was like, yeah, maybe I will. Like, but New York just like has this weird pull on you. And I think I just have gotten so spoiled with living here that anytime I go visit other places in the US, I'm just get like kind of bored very quickly because New York is just so big and there's just like so much to do. And I think also as you get older, like it's harder to make friends the older you get. So like going to a new city and starting over like brand new and be like super fresh in a new place without having your like social circle would be very hard. Like I commend like people that are able to do that as they get older. Like I'm 30 now. So, if I were to like uproot, I've spent 8 years like cultivating friendships and relationships and like to your point, dating here. It's just, it would be, I think, a big challenge to just like kind of uproot all of that and go somewhere where I didn't know anybody. I don't necessarily like want to raise children in New York. I don't think, like, it's such an expensive city. I assume that I would want like a bigger family, and it's just not conducive to that. But I do think it really just depends on like my future partner. If there's like a place that he wants, I think it's different. Like right now I'm 30 and single, and like I don't want to be at like, settle down in like suburbia, like having kids right now. So I don't know where else I would go except maybe like Europe, like Paris or London or another big city where I wouldn't feel like bored after a weekend or a month there. But I don't necessarily know if I do have children, like if I would want to have, them be raised in the city or even in Brooklyn. It just feels like it's so different and so far removed from what I grew up with. Like I had a lawn and neighbors and suburbia, and it's just like, that was great growing up,
Yeah, that's definitely like, that's the thing for me too, is like growing up in Miami, like I technically am in suburbia, but like Miami's a city. So it's like the best of both worlds. And I don't know if I could start over somewhere new, like the whole friendship thing and everything. But yeah, obviously it depends on like the other person involved as well. And where their roots are and their family, and but that's something that I've thought about a lot. And I was actually talking about this with my professor yesterday. We went for a walk around, it's like one of my favorite lakes in Knoxville. You have to think about that. Like if your families don't live in the same city because you guys met somewhere else, or like, because like when you meet older, that tends to be the case that one of you doesn't live near your family or both of you don't, like then you're splitting time for the holidays. You're like, flying to like go see everybody, make sure everybody meets the kids. And like, that's like also hard. So it's like, where do you set down roots? But I mean, we don't have to think about that now. And like, I'm about to be 27, and like, I'm enjoying not having to worry about those things. But like, as I get older, though, those are considerations. And I'm like, okay, that's definitely something that I do want my kids to have the upbringing that I had, and know where I come from, but also want them to know where their dad came from, and like that side of the family too. Like, so it's definitely interesting, especially because we are so career focused, and that's what's the most important to us now. But like also balancing like wanting a family, but also being like a city girl, and it's like, how do you combine or like navigate all these different versions of you?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's like, it's so tricky. I will say my boss, Julianne, who's the founder of the agency that I work at now, just had her second baby. And she has like inspired me to be like this, like working mom, like boss. Like she has not let it impact her life. I mean, obviously it's impacted her life significantly, and she's like an incredible mother, but like she still like loves her agency and like still loves to work, and like is shows up. And I don't know, like I think everyone's different when they have babies, but I think she's just like an inspiration to me to be like, okay, you don't have to pick and choose. Like you don't have to become a mother and then like sacrifice what your whole life was like before that. You can like still, work. And like, I mean, I know you can still work, like, but it's inspiring to like see how she's not let it like completely like overtake her life, and still like lives in the city. She lives in Williamsburg, and they have like 2 kids, and both her and her husband work, and she owns this agency. So she's like, it's just very cool and inspiring to know that like it doesn't have to be like one or the other, or it doesn't have to like impact your life so significantly that you have to give up other things that you love. I'm sure there are big sacrifices that you have to take, but it's been nice. It's been beautiful to watch like her, become a mother. I've been at her agency for 3.5 years now, and she had her first baby right when I first joined, and then her second baby she just had. So these last 3 years, it's been fun to watch her like become a mother, and then like, still work and manage dialogue. And I actually got on with her this morning to chat, and she had like her baby June just like sleeping on her chest, and we were like running through all of like the client stuff and talking about day-to-day stuff, but she's like still just like trying to get June to go to sleep. It was really cute, and also just like such a boss, like so cool that she's able to do both.
That's goals. Like, that's the thing. Like I'm so happy you have that to look up to, because that's the whole thing, right? It's like, we shouldn't ever have had to give that up and like choose one. And totally. I'm glad that we're kind of starting to be more part of the conversation that you don't have to, although society still makes you think you do. Like that's never, I don't think that's ever really going to go away. There's always going to be that like imbalance and that push and pull. But it's nice to see more women doing that. And whether it's at their founders and owners and also a mother, or just very high up executives and mothers, but that they don't have to give up their career and their passions and their interest in their own lives to also build another life. And you know, that you can do both. And that's my hope. And similar to like her being like hopping on a call with you with the baby, like that's for me, the best part about the fact that I can work for myself and can work from home is like, if I were to have a kid, like it would be right here with me, like hanging out with me while I'm doing my work. And, you know, I want that. I want to be able to be like present, but also have my own thing going on and live for myself, not just them, but also live with them and create a life with them too. So that's cool that she's been intentional about that. And, you know, I think we're starting to see more of it, but I hope that we continue to see even more of it as we continue to get closer to that one day, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I also think just having like a female boss is just, it makes that easier because women just relate to that a little bit more. So I think like, you know, when that time comes for me, if I'm still at Dialogue, like I know that I could have like a really great conversation with Julianne about like, you know, my schedule, what works for me, because she's coming back part-time, like slowly. And, you know, I think that's something that like I would probably want to do as well. Like I'd love to work. I don't mean that like to sound obnoxious, but like I don't think I would be able to just sit around and like twiddle my thumbs, even if I had a baby.
I'm the same.
Like, yeah, like I feel like I just don't have purpose. Like I need to like do something. So it's nice when you work, like a female, you know, a woman CEO or boss, because they probably like can relate. And then because I work at such a small agency and I'm so close with Julianne, like you can really craft, I think, like a program that works well for you, which I know is not standard across, you know, all industries, and not so many people are as lucky to be able to do something like that. But, you know, it's just, it's something that I feel like I would definitely want to come back to work, like I think fairly quickly. I say that now as a 30-year-old who's single, has no idea.
It's funny. It's kind of flip-flop for me. Like my mom went right back to work. Like I'm a Thanksgiving baby, and by January she was back. And, you know, with my brother too, like very quickly. And I always thought that was going to be me. And so I do still want to go back to work, but the older I get, because I do run my own thing, I'm like, maybe I'll go part-time, you know, or pause for a little bit while I'm like really getting used to, especially the first one, you know, getting accustomed to having somebody else and like not sleeping and that kind of thing. Because I don't function well if I don't sleep. And then once I have like a handle on that, like, I would 100% be bored. Like I could not just be at home with the baby. Like, I admire people who can. That's cool. That's just not my thing. And like, I want someone to provide for me, and I want someone to take care of me and support the baby. But like, I also want to do that for myself. Like, I know that I need to have my own thing and have a purpose beyond being a wife and a mother. All of that is also a purpose, and that's part of it. I want more. I want both. Why can't we have it all? Like that whole thing of like, you can have it all, just not all at once. Yeah. Like it's going to take time. It's not all going to happen together. But I do want all of it. So I know that I will at some point go back to work. And I like you said, like it's not the same for everyone, but I can't wait to we have the ability to craft it for ourselves. And I think that's the best part, is that we have the luxury of doing that. And I know it's a luxury, but like I'm excited for that opportunity when it comes. But right now it's nice to be in this moment, but just conscious of it at the same time.
Totally.
What was it like, you know, you said like in college, you knew you always wanted to be in New York, you wanted to be in PR, you know, growing up, like, was it always that from the beginning, or did that come in college? Like, how did you know you wanted to do PR?
Yeah. So I feel like I just always knew that that's like the path that I wanted to go down. I think I didn't really like know a lot about PR when I was younger, but I just knew that like even in high school, like that I was not going to go in like an industry where like I would need to be like, you know, doing data and like science and math. Like those just weren't the subjects that I was strongest in school. And I like loved writing. I love reading, like still do. I'd like, I think I'm just a little bit more creative. And I loved like what I realized later, like in college, is that I really loved like building relationships and like communicating and like talking to people. And at first I thought I wanted to go into broadcast journalism because that's obviously a lot of what that is. But I like did a course on that in school for a semester and like thought maybe I would major in it. And like quickly realized that I was like not meant to do that. Like, I don't want to be like in front of the camera. I also didn't like relying on like, you have to have like people to interview for every story to have any like sort of basis or foundation, and like to rely on other people, even for me, was just like, just for my grades. Like I had to go out on into like the streets and do like mock interviews and like find people to interview for certain things. And I was like, this is so stressful. Like, I don't want to have to rely on everybody else to get like a grade or to get like a story out there. I want to just be able to like brainstorm it and craft it myself. Like I want to build a strategy myself, and like that's how I'll get my grades. So I like pivoted over to public relations. And my school, Loyola University in New Orleans, has a huge communications program. So I was able to like kind of test in all of the different branches. So PR and advertising and like broadcast journalism were all options to me. So I was able to kind of like play around, but PR just felt like the most exciting to me. I still think even in college, like I didn't actually like fully grasp what it was until I feel like you don't really get, a full understanding, because it can be so different. Like the PR that I was doing in school, like when we had like mock clients for like charities or organized nonprofits or, other like New Orleans based founded companies, that type of PR was so different from the PR that I ended up doing when I moved to New York, which was like beauty PR, like a really small boutique agency. So there's also like thought leadership PR, and then there's like, consumer PR. So it's just like really depends on, what kind of branch you want to go into. But I found that beauty PR just kind of fell into my lap. It was just the industry that first job that I got was at this really small boutique agency based in Soho in New York. And I worked directly with the founder of the company. And there was like, one other girl on our team. So I got like tons of just hands-on experience. And that's like, I think I called it my crash course in PR, where I really like learned everything. And those like that year that I was there, or 11 months that I stayed at that agency, I like learned so much about the industry and thought that that's what I wanted to do for a while. And then I worked at another agency called Full Picture for 4 years. And I loved that it was bigger. It was more, I had better coworkers, better friends, just like, it was a very different vibe. And we had bigger clients. So I was working on like celebrity owned brands, like for the most part, a lot of the Kardashian brands. And then I worked on like Living Proof and Becca Cosmetics, which was a huge highlighter brand at the time. And I loved that too. But then like started to think like, okay, I do like PR, but like I'm going to pigeonhole myself if I stay in this industry forever. And I don't know if it's what I want to do forever. Like I enjoyed it while I did it. While I was young, I went to lots of events and it was very like fast paced and like the grind and hustle culture. And you just get like swept into that as like a young person. So it was really cool for me to experience that while I was young, like in my early and mid 20s. And 3.5 years ago, I was like, I don't think I want to do beauty forever. It feels very monotonous after a while. That I wasn't like being as creative as I wanted to be. I didn't really want to do like celebrity stuff anymore. I was kind of like over the whole celebrity and talent, like culture and entertainment culture. So I was like, how can I transfer these skills to another industry? And influencer marketing is obviously huge. I follow tons of influencers. I did at the time. And I just knew that was like such a cool industry. And I think a lot of my skills, which is all on the agency side. So like client management, like owning client calls, building those relationships, like managing somebody on a team. A lot of that was transferable to my job, at Dialogue, where I ended up going. I needed a little bit more of that like negotiation experience in terms of just like day-to-day influencer marketing, like work, but I had like a solid grasp of it. And so that's how I kind of transferred over to influencer marketing. So that was long-winded, but like, yeah, I think it just fell in my lap. And I just like knew that there was some sort of like communications job where I could be creative and write and like build relationships and talk to people. Like I knew that that's kind of like where my passion or my skill set really like flourishes. And so I think it's then just like deciding like, okay, how, you know, what do you want this to look like, and how do you want to make this happen?
Yeah. No, I think it's cool that I'm glad you shared the long-winded story, because I feel like a lot of people go into that industry, PR or entertainment and media in general, because of the glamour of the events and celebrities and, you know, access to products and like all that fun stuff. So for you, the fact that the goal was the strategy piece of it and like the actual work that it entails, I think that's so cool, because I've never heard people talk about it quite like that. And to me, that was like the whole thing that like inspired me to want to be a lawyer in the influencer industry too. Was like I knew what it was like to be an influencer, like, and I know the glamour side of it because I see it, and it does look glamorous. But I also knew the business side of it and how much work it took, and that's the part of it that actually was more fascinating to me, was the business side of it and all the contracts and like all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see to make it look so seamless. Like the fact that that was what was interesting to you is I'm glad you shared that. Like that to me is so interesting. But and you mentioned like you ended up the beauty thing kind of fell in your lap, and then you didn't want to pigeonhole yourself. But like when you were first looking for internships, like for being from somewhere, like you did have connections to New York, but your roots were in the South, and like you were in New Orleans. Like, did your school have internship opportunities, access to New York, or how did you seek out those opportunities? Like what kind of roles can someone who goes to college not in New York get for summer opportunities in New York? Like what kind of roles were you doing?
Yeah, such a good question. My first internship was at BBC America. I thought I wanted to do like talent relations. So 2 of my internship experiences in college were on the talent side, because I like loved celebrity culture, loved pop culture. Like I used to get, when I was growing up, my like treat that I would like subscribe for and pay for myself was like an Us Weekly subscription to the magazine that I would get like every Wednesday or whenever that was.
Mine was like Teen Vogue.
Yeah, like I ate it up. Like I loved celebrity gossip and celebrity culture. Like I knew every celebrity name, like pop culture, all of it. I just like I like literally loved it. And so talent like felt really cool. So I got my internship at BBC America. I think I was like just applying to tons of positions. I honestly feel like that internship, my aunt used to work at MTV for a really long time, and she had some like connections. I don't know if she had a connection at BBC America, but I think I like met somebody who like introduced me to Freya last, who was my very first boss. And I feel like at the time she was probably my age now, like 30. And I was like 20 years old and just thought she was like the coolest person. Like I remember her to this day. She was my very first boss, and she was like, just like absolutely the coolest, and didn't treat me like an intern, like treated me like an equal. And I like the work that I did was like very intern level work, but like I truly just loved her so much. I had the biggest girl crush on her, and like still kind of follow her loosely today. Like I try to stalk her all the time because I just love her so much. But that was my like very first internship. And then from there, I really just was like applying. I remember I studied abroad in London and the spring semester of my junior year, and I was looking for an internship that summer. And I was like applying in London to internships like all day. I was applying to like hundreds of internships, like all in New York, just like had my resume updated and was just like trying to get as many applications out as I could, because it is just a numbers game. And back then all those internships were unpaid, so I was just getting school credit for them. And I lived out in Westchester with my aunt. So I didn't have to like figure out housing or rent. Like it's very privileged that I was like able to do that, because lots of people, well, now they're paid. So I guess you can like come and do like, there's like budget housing for internships and stuff with like NYU. But I think I got like pretty lucky with that first one, and living with my aunt and not having to like worry about, paying rent in the city on an internship salary. My second internship was with a very small like talent agency called AMF Entertainment. And again, I worked directly with like the founder of that agency. I like love small agencies. I cannot like say enough about how good they are for like young people to grow, because you learn so much when you have like direct access to this like higher up people. If it's just like you and a couple other people, it might not be like the vibe that you want when you're young, where you want to have like tons of coworkers and like do all this fun stuff. But like from a skill, like experience perspective, like those internships that I worked at that were really small, my first job that was at a really tiny agency, like truly changed, I think, the trajectory of my career. I learned so much, and then I was able to like kind of fast track myself up the ladder, if you will. Like my second, I was at that first job at a tiny agency for 11 months. And then I got a job as an account executive at Full Picture. And I was only like, 11 months into my career. And typically you are a coordinator for many years before you like, jump up to that next level of an account executive. But because I had such incredible experience and had learned so much and done so much in those 11 months, I felt like ready for that and, advocated for that when I applied for my job at Full Picture. So I really cannot stress that like enough, of the benefit of working for small teams and then really giving yourself access to the CEO or the C-suite or the VP or whoever it is that's like at the top, because you learn so much from those people when you do have that direct access. And I'm still learning. Like I learn every day from Julianne, who's like the founder. She's my direct boss. Like I report directly to her. And I mean, I can't stress enough how amazing it's been working directly with her. I learn from her literally every day just by like hearing her talk. And when we do brainstorms and things like that, it's just incredible. So, but I would say from an internship perspective, like really apply to everything and don't pigeonhole yourself into one specific industry. I think like you never know what you're going to love. And I think even if you don't love your first internship, you learn so much from it. Like anything, all of that experience is good. Like you learn what you like and you also learn what you don't like. And that's important too. It's like really good to know like what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like, what you don't like all of that is invaluable when you're young. So apply to everything. Like I thought I wanted to do talent relations. Now I work in influencer marketing. Like you just never know where that, your path is going to take you. And I think any experience is good experience to try to just get your foot in the door and figure out, what you're good at and what you want to do.
100%. I always say it's actually more important to find out what you don't like and what you don't want to do. And the only way you do that is by doing it and discovering, like checking off the list. Okay, like definitely don't want that, or what kind of boss you don't want, or what kind of manager you don't want to be. Like all of those things are arguably more important sometimes than the glamorous job with, lots of events and lots of happy hours and being super social. Like, and I like what you said of going to the small agencies too. When you're the one day in and out doing the work and there isn't that many levels of hierarchy or like approvals, and you're really getting in the nitty gritty and learning on the go and making mistakes and being corrected and given feedback and all of that, like that's where you really learn. So I'm glad you shared that. Like it typically would take a couple of years, but because of that experience, you were able to move up quicker. And also that you shared about the intern housing and like payment, because I was going to ask that, like how do you fund a lifestyle in New York when you're an intern not getting paid or getting paid very, very little? It's good to know that there's like internship housing and stuff. I didn't know about that. I mean, I kind of figured like those dorms sit empty during the summer, so it makes sense if they do something with it. I have a friend who went to NYU for her LLM, and like they, there's like, even for law students, there's dorms because it's just, that's how it works in the city. But exactly. I think I agree. Like I worked at small firms or newer firms my entire law school career. And now I have my own, and like I know how to run one because of that experience. Like if I had gone to a big firm and there was like all these systems and procedures and structures, and then you go start your own, like you don't know anything. You're learning from the beginning, and it's a lot harder to do it when you only know like your tiny role in like a much bigger pie. But when you're doing everything, you're able to really figure out what you're good at and what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. And you can delegate or build a team around that, or go to your superior and say like, hey, like we need this, and this is what I can do. I need someone to help me with this. Like, how are we going to build a team for that or whatever? What is it like when you are a direct report to someone, that is the top level or like really close to the top, and you are kind of lower on the totem pole, but don't really know enough, but you're going straight to the source. Like, what is that relationship like?
Yeah. I mean, when I was, that my first job at D2 Publicity was what the agency was called. I don't think it's around anymore. I think the founder went in-house at some other agency years after I left, but I worked directly with her. So I was fresh out of school and it was so scary. Like, I'm not going to pretend that like I wasn't nervous every single day going to work and just nervous about making mistakes and anxious. But looking back on it, I think being thrown into the deep end like that was only going to help, it was only going to serve me in like really, really good ways. And I think working directly with the founder of a company it was very scary. I didn't have anybody in the middle. The senior person like left my first day. So it was just like me and the founder. But I learned a lot from her and I took advantage of that. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be in this position, like, yes, she knows that I'm going to have to like learn, but I can't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, I know I'm going to fuck up and something's going to happen. Cause it does, we're all human, like everyone makes mistakes, but learning from those mistakes and like understanding why the mistake was made and what happened. And then like, making sure that that doesn't continue to happen. Like it becomes an issue when it's like a repeat, mistake that keeps happening. But I asked so many questions. Like I asked for feedback. Like I love constructive criticism. I thrive on it. Like it is how I learn. I've always been like that. And I love giving constructive feedback to my team. And I love receiving it from my bosses. Like it means so. I think it's like the best way to learn is to understand why something isn't the way that it should be and then how to fix it. And then not being spoon-fed the solution. I think like the proactiveness and deductive reasoning is so important too. Like my boss was like kind of checked out sometimes. Like she was a mom and she just kind of like would, just throw things at me. And then like, I would just work on them and see what happened. And so a lot of the times she wasn't in the office or would be like out running around doing things like, running to client lunches and whatever that looked like. So there were times when like I didn't feel like I could like reach out to her directly as like a coordinator when I'm just 5 months into my career. So I would just like try to do deductive reasoning and try to understand or figure out the solution, or at least come to her with my recommended solution. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. And if it's right, then it's right. So there's so much that you learn from that. But I think like in today's culture, this was a long time ago, it was 8 years ago, but like now I think a lot of these like, the coordinator level girls that we hire and these people, these, entry level people come in and I think they just like really want to have, everything spoon fed to them. And I think there's so much like value in like being pushed off the deep end and just learning from your mistakes and trying to do things and just figuring it out, because that is truly the way that I learned. And I, did have to advocate for myself a lot. Like, in that first year, there were lots of things, that I learned that I didn't like, and like things that I didn't like about, how to be managed, and things that I knew that I would never want to do, or values that I wouldn't want to have as a manager myself. Like you learn so much about it. And to your point, like learning what you do and what you don't like is just as valuable and just as important as what you do. But I think like recognizing that person, that CEO or the founder or the VP or whoever it is that you're reporting to is a huge value and like a huge asset to you. And like, that's really going to be where you kind of move and drive impact for yourself, is when you're like, okay, let me take advantage of the fact that I have like such direct access to this person and, understand that they're busy and that they are doing 100 different things. So how can I be of value to them? Like, what can I do to make sure that they are supported and that I'm actually like helping them and doing the right thing? And, that I think a lot of that comes with that like proactiveness of just being like, okay, like this is what I think is the right answer, as opposed to just being like, hey, this happened. Like, I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, hey, this happened. Like, here's what I think I should do. Is this right? Like even that little mindset shift goes such a long way for, those senior staff members. And I think it really helps those coordinators and those junior staff members to like practice that idea of like figuring things out on your own, trying and failing, seeing what happens. And all of that is just so critical to success, I think.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I think it really makes me sad when I see the entitlement of the newer people. They think like just because they did really well in school or they had you know, all these internships or all of this, or their mom or whoever's like in whatever position. It's like, yes, you get a lot of valuable skills from those roles. And yes, you might know a lot and you might be really smart or really good or really well connected. But every company that you go to has a different way of doing things and has a system and a process and a method. And, you know, I think you need to really kind of learn to sit back and observe and kind of see where you could be solution oriented, absolutely come in with a question and an answer, even if it's wrong, but also sit back and let other people kind of show you the way first before you just like, you know, or it's come here to collect a paycheck. Like, it's not just about coming here to collect a paycheck. Like, don't just like day in and day out, I only need to do my 9 to 5, you know, do enough, get my paycheck and go home. Like, you know, I have whatever, like, it baffles me sometimes. Cause it's like, don't get me wrong. We all have those days where, like you said, like you didn't have the best experience. Like you could have easily been like, I don't want to show up today. I'm just do the bare minimum and walk out. And I'm sure there's days where you did phone it in, and like we all have those days, but like you have to be willing to put up with it for the short term, for the long term gain of like, what can you get out of this and how could this help you? And I see that being lost a lot. They're so quick, and we're all guilty of it, quick to be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this sucks, like whatever. But if you don't give it an opportunity to really teach you what is going on and like understand why these things happen, and like you said, the relationships, like, why is this boss being that way? Did something happen? Is something going on in their life? Like, can I be of assistance to them in a different way? Instead of, sometimes your job isn't just what's on your job description. Sometimes it does expand to more, and being willing to do those other things is what is going to allow you to get promoted or get more money or get opportunities. But I like what you said about being solution oriented and the deductive reasoning and critical thinking. And, you know, I was guilty of that in my first job as an associate. Like, I hated it. I didn't want to do it, that type of law. And so I just would do the bare minimum, and I would just show up and be like, okay, tell me what I need to know. Like, what do I need to do? And I remember he was like, I'm just like, I'm not going to help you. Like, I'm going to throw you to the wolves and you figure it out yourself. Like, that's how I learned. And you said it too. Like, there's a lot of value in that. Absolutely. However, it hurt me and our client and the case more for him to do that than to sit down and explain it to me. So it's like, there's a balance to strike of like when it's okay to be thrown to the wolves and when you need to ask for help. But if you don't try to show that you know what you're doing and that you can add something valuable to the team, maybe you're never going to get it. So it's like cautionary tale of like, you know, it's okay to phone it in sometimes, but, you know, try. Even if you know you're wrong, at least attempt that, you know, because if not, they're going to throw you to the wolves, because that is how it's historically been done. And there is still value in it, even though it really does suck. But there's times to do the throwing into the wolves that aren't going to hurt your client and other people. And then there's times where they really should be a better boss to you and provide that assistance. So it's a hard balance to strike. But how do you know, you said you left there after 11 months. Like, when did you find the next role? Like, were you looking for a new job and this full picture role came up, or did they kind of find you? Like, how do you know when it's time to go, and when, you know, how do you take what you learn in a past role that maybe wasn't the best to a new role?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I knew from like probably the first month that first job was just not something that I knew I would like to do long term. I learned a lot about what I don't like in that role, and what what I'm good at, what I'm not good at.
I think that's like a universal experience of like a first job. Like, it's not supposed to be the right job.
Exactly. Like, most people don't stay like in their first couple of jobs forever. Like, it's just not. So it's like,
and you don't have to. I hate that whole like, I'm married, like I got this job, I have to stay, I have to make it work. It's like, no, it's okay that you moved around. Like, that whole thing of like, it looks bad if you jump around too much. Like, it's like, they're going to understand if you move around, like if you are honest with why. But if the reason is because you're not doing the work, then that's a different story.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's all about integrity. So it's like understanding, like, to your point, advocating for yourself, listening to yourself. Like, are you drained every day when you come into work, or do you really like what you're doing? Are there certain parts of your job that you love more than others? At Dialogue, we now call it like our zone of genius, which Julianne implemented, where it's like figuring out what we like love to do and what really fuels us. And then also understanding what drains us and what we don't like, and like what really like takes away from that, and understanding how to craft a position or a career that really highlights what you love and what fuels you, because ultimately that's going to just like, translate into all of your work if you love what you do. So if you go into your first job and you hate it and you're drained and you're exhausted and you're anxious and you're just like, you just know that that's not it. Okay. Like, have the integrity to, firstly, of course, acknowledge that and understand that, and then still be able to like show up and produce the, good work that needs to get done. Like, phone it in. Yeah. Like when you feel like you need to sometimes, but I think like there is this big thing of like integrity, of understanding that like, this is laddering back up to larger goals and business goals and clients and things like that. And so, yeah, I think I knew within the first like month that I didn't want to be at that agency. I listened to my body, and like the reaction that I would get from, going to work every day, it just wasn't what I wanted. And I knew that there was better opportunities out there. So I was like, okay, like grit it out for a couple months, start looking elsewhere now that you at least like have this job. But I like continued to produce really good work, and I continued to learn at that agency. And I think that's like the most important part of it, is like, yes, start looking, understand that you don't like this. It isn't what you want to do forever. But like, I was like, I can still learn so much in these like months that I'm still here while I'm looking for something else. And I learned a lot. I continued to work. And then I was applying to other jobs actively, like, 6 months in, and I got my job at Full Picture. After like 11 months, and left and went to Full Picture. It was the same thing. It was a beauty agency, but Full Picture is just a bigger agency. And my clients were bigger, more well-known. And I just learned like a lot more at that agency in terms of just like, I think different styles of PR. And like, I did a little bit of like thought leadership PR as well. And then we also did tiny bit of influencer work as well. And I realized like while all the other girls were like going out to get like lunches and do things with like editors, I was like going out to like meet influencers, because like at the time, like that was kind of like starting to pop off. I mean, influencer marketing was already big at that point, but like I think back then there was still like a really solid divide between influencer and PR, and like editors and influencers. And now I think editors are influencers in their own right. And like there's just this like like joining of PR and influencer that we haven't seen really before. I think they go hand in hand, and there's a lot of similarities between both of them. And now we're starting to see like that kind of join. But back then it was very split. So there's now lots of PR agencies that also do influencer marketing, and it's not really like separate as it once was. But back then I was like, I love influencers. Like I was like, I want to go out and meet all the influencers, and I want to do things with them. And I enjoyed beauty. Like we had a beauty closet. I loved getting access to like all the samples and the makeup and hair and skin.
I told you this when we first talked, but like going back to like you're Us Weekly and me, like Teen Vogue, like the editors were the influencers back then. They set the trends. They were the original influencers, because we were all following what they were saying. It was Bible. It was in black and white print,
Yeah.
And we like, they would talk about like the Vogue closet and the beauty closet and like all this stuff. And it was like the dream. And like, I think in a past life, if I didn't go the legal route, I work on the legal side of that world now. Like I work with agencies and PR companies and like influencers all day long. But I think I would have loved to do like what you do and like have access to that. Like, that to me is so fun and fascinating. But I love how you said that like all the other girls wanted to go hang out with the editors, and you're like, I want to go hang out with the influencers. It's like, yeah, they are one and the same. They're just, we're all different pieces of the puzzle. They all collectively work together. So I'm glad we're starting to see that really come about.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, like editors, to your point, back then they were influencers, because what we call that now is like an expert or tastemaker. It's somebody who has like an expertise in something. Like they are influencers still in their own right, even more so now than I think they were before. But like back then it was like bloggers and like founders of brands, and like that's who we kind of like looked to, or like actual experts like dermatologists and like chefs and athletes and all those types of creators too. There's like different buckets for how we define what an influencer is and like the type of influence that they drive. But yeah, I think I just knew, and I loved it. I loved all of it. Like I loved meeting influencers and editors. I loved going out with them and like I think that's really when I was started to think about like, okay, beauty isn't what I want to do forever. I don't want to like pitch beauty brands and talk about like summer must-haves and like dry skin favorites and like all of that stuff. I was like, I don't want to do this forever. I know that I don't want to do this forever. Like I got to make a change. And so that's when I was like, okay, I love this side of it. Like I love the relationship building. I like building strategies for PR, but I was like, I can go further when you work with influencer. And so I was like, okay, like what have the skills that I've basically like, acquired or honed in on over the last 5 years in PR, and like, how can I translate these to another industry? And honestly, I think Julianne hired me because I like really talked a lot about that. Like I was like, I don't have a lot of like tons of negotiation experience. Like I didn't come from like the agency side where I've just been like doing influencer deals forever. Like I come from a side where it's like a lot of like strategic thinking, and like we would pitch brands for like, it was more about like publicity and like getting the reputation of the brand, and like building relationships with like celebrities. And like, that's what PR kind of was at the time for our brands. And then like, so I was like, oh, that's what I love to do. So how can I kind of like bring that over to an influencer agency? And I really do think that's why Julianne hired me, is because like we first of all, our conversation, like our first interview was great. We just like, had a really good connection right away. And I can talk to a brick wall, I think, at this point. So like that's big for client relationships too. And like client stuff is like just being able to feel very comfortable on a call. And like my team jokes all the time, because every time I get on a call, like I always like to do a couple minutes of just like chit chat with our clients, so we don't like immediately just like jump into status. And my go-to is always like either the weather, or like I follow them all on Instagram. So I'm always like, oh my God, you did like XYZ this weekend. That looks so cool. But like they always joke. They're like, Sophie like loves to talk about the weather at the beginning of calls. And I'm like, well, it's important to like, and I probably did that with you. Like when we first popped on,
we did do it, but I'm the same. I'm the exact same way. Like, I think it's important to set the tone. Like you've seen it in movies where like the businessman, like, okay, we're here to talk about blah, 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 and it's immediately jumps into numbers. And it's like, whoa, okay. Like, how's your day? How was your weekend? How's your wife? How's the kids? Like, that's important. And I've learned from seeing my parents do that on their calls. They genuinely care about the people that they work with, up and down, subordinate and managers. And I was actually at a leadership conference all weekend, and that was the thing. It's like, how are you a leader in your community? And leadership goes up too. Like you have to lead upward. Sometimes you have to go to the person that you are the direct report to and say, hey, this isn't working. We need to make a change. And how do you get them to listen? Like they need to trust you and like see you as a leader in your own right, because you're tasked with leading a team and like all these other things. It was a really great conference actually. But and it was like particularly to lawyers, but like it's just leadership in general. Like there's leaders all across the board. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that, like the conversation that you had with Julianne, and like what you said of, you knew that you wanted to do something different. And so you were willing to seek opportunities out that were going to allow you to still use what you did know, but in a new way. And I think the relationship goes two ways. It's like you building the relationship with her and clicking with her. She values that. She's going to be intrigued by you. She's going to want to take interest in you and see what you have to say and listen to your ideas. But also you were at the forefront of, or at least you saw it coming, that influencer agencies and brands, like it's all relationships. I spend all day talking to agencies and law and legal teams, building a relationship with them. Like we joke, it's like, have a good weekend. Happy Friday. Happy Monday. How's your weekend? Like the beginning of the email is always a little bit like personal. And then we're like, all right, go back to the red lines, like focus, time to like get this shit done. Cause you have to. And the fact that Julianne was really receptive to that, I think goes to show like why her agency is maybe different than other ones, or other ones at least that you've worked at. And that's the future. What do you do now in like a PR and influencer marketing hybrid role? Or is it like, do you still do traditional PR work? Like what is your role now, and how do you lead a team, but also being close in age to a lot of them? Like you mentioned, like your first intern back in college, like she was where you are now age wise. So now you're in her role and you're leading a team of people that are 22, 23, and you know, it's 8 years, but it's really like nowadays we can look for like we're 22 also. So like how do you kind of navigate friendship up and down while also leading?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. I work solely on the influencer side now. I like knew, I think that I didn't want to like do PR. We used to have a PR agency and I would like kind of help lead the agency, which was fun because then I was like on the other side of it. But I don't really touch PR anymore. But I just like advise with Julianne on like some PR things that Megan on our team, who, you know, like helps us kind of like do for the agency. But I knew that I wanted to just kind of like focus on influencer. But I will say, yeah, like I think like the relationship building piece is huge. And it's like, that's, I think what separates us from lots of other agencies is that we do develop and build very personal and like intentional relationships with both of our, like everyone on our team, you know, all of our clients, all of our agents that we work with, all of the influencers that we work with. We're all doing it manually. And like, to your point, like you said, we also like we don't like do blasts of emails all the time. Like a lot of them are like, hey, like saw XX had a baby, like so exciting. We'd love to set her up with some formula, or like, you know, we like really try to be personalized in our approach. But yeah, like, you know, when I started at Full Picture, I was an account executive with 11 months of experience. So I was definitely still at that age where I should have been a coordinator. But I was in this account executive role, and the coordinators that I then was like overseeing at the time were like my age or even sometimes older than me. So it was like a really interesting dynamic to like, you know, build and foster relationships with like the people that I was working with while also like either being the same age as them, if not older. And it was kind of like a challenge that I like faced for a lot of my time at Full Picture. I think for like most of my time there, I was always just like a little bit younger. And I think I really just like learned how to like kind of find this fine line between like, you know, making sure that I have like respect from the girls that I worked with, but also had like a very great relationship with them. And that's something that I've transferred today. I've managed, you know, the full team at Dialogue under, you know, like honor gifting in our paid program, so that everyone else on the team outside of obviously Julianne. And I've managed, that's more people than I've ever managed before. And it's, I think I've taken a lot of that, you know, what I learned in that first role of like feeling like I was kind of like tiptoeing around and like didn't really have the authority. I had to like really do like kind of force that upon myself of like, okay, you are in this position for a reason. Like you advocated for yourself and you got here and you're here for a reason. So, I mean, imposter syndrome is like so huge and I still struggle with it today. But, you know, at that time I was like, why, how am I even like managing anybody? Like I'm only 22 years old, 23 years old. Like, but I had to like really just like force myself to be like, okay, you're here for a reason. You have this authority, you have this opinion, like, you know, this is what you need to do. And then I think a lot of that, I brought with me into this new role where I'm managing like a team. And I think I do still try to like strike that balance of friendship and having like a really great rapport with everyone on my team and making sure that I'm available for them outside of work things. So like mentorship coffees and just like, you know, going out with them, and we do like team lunches and like chit chatting with them when we're not just talking about work. Like, I think that all of that really goes a long way. I don't want to be seen as like this person that's like not available, even to like the coordinators and the interns on our team. I want them to have access to me because I had access to the senior level people when I was younger. And it's so important. Like we've talked about this whole podcast. So like for me, it was like, okay, fine, build that, like make sure they have respect for me and that, you know, when I ask them to do something, it's getting done, but then also having this like great relationship with them. And that's the same, like with our clients, it's just a little different. Like for clients, I'm like, you know, they're paying us. So we have to have this like authority and this expertise and, you know, make sure that they're paying us and that we're like providing really great work for them because, you know, that's what they're paying us for, but also having a great relationship with them. Like I love that chit chat at the beginning. I love following a lot of them along on social media and just like seeing what else they're doing outside of work and, you know, being part of their lives in other ways and going to coffees and networking and like doing big in-person meetings where we can brainstorm strategy. And I think just having that relationship goes such a long way in terms of like client retention and also just building that trust with our clients. And again, same as like with my managing a team, building trust with my team. Like I want them to trust me and to trust in me and to feel comfortable and confident and supported, but also like, you know, that they can go out and like do all the things like I celebrate mistakes because everybody makes them and they happen all the time. But we have a very high expectation of like, you know, the quality of work we're producing for our clients. So there's just like two sides of it, I think, for both team management and then client management as well. They're very similar. I think there's like a lot of synergies between the two. But I think there is just that fine line. And same with like having my boss, like Julianne, like I have a great relationship with her. We're very, very close, but I also understand that she's like the CEO of the agency and that she's my boss. So there's a level of respect that goes into that as well. That I think I just have innately like, you know, understood and developed and honed in on over the years, is like striking that balance and making sure that Julianne knows that I respect her and that, you know, what she says goes, but also that I can push back and like that I can share my thoughts and my opinions on things. And there's a way to do that that's, you know, respectful and, you know, there's like, you know, ways to kind of structure that. But I think the more room you have to be able to do that, the better. And that balance of respect and authority and, you know, personal relationships and working relationships, it's all just like such a fine line that, you know, I've kind of like honed in on over the years.
Yeah. I think it comes a lot to, like you said, like being available to them, especially like, I mean, I'm sure maybe not so much right now, she's a new baby, but like Julianne was always accessible and available to you, but I'm sure she had her boundaries with you, especially earlier on when you were just starting out working there and you guys were kind of figuring out that dynamic. So you have to do the same with your team. Like, you know, these people are probably 21, 22, new to the city, are, you know, might have never lived in a big city like that before. You want to be available to them. Like, if you need me, call me. Like, if something happens or you need someone to walk you home or whatever. Also, having those boundaries of like, unless it's an emergency, don't call me past a certain time of night, or, you know, having access to you, but also putting boundaries in place of like when they have access to you for things that are outside of a certain scope, and still being that big sister and that mentor and that friend to them. But and I think respect goes both ways. I think with a lot of times we forget that it goes both ways. It's not just that you have to respect your superior. They also have to respect you too. So if they confide in you, you don't go and tell your boss, even if they probably should know, that's not your story to tell. Or like, you don't go to tell like the other person, like, oh, so-and-so said this, like, you know, that's between you and them. They confided in you. So you're going to respect them enough to know that that's a big deal that they came to you, and you're going to keep that to yourself. And you're going to, in a week or two, be like, hey, are things better? Like, have you resolved that? Like, is there anything I can help you with? You know, let's go to coffee. And building that respect both ways, having those boundaries in place, they'll learn to recognize that like they can trust you and that they can go to you, and then they're going to want to do better for you to see like the value that they're putting in. And then they're going to go higher up the ranks, and so are you. And it's like, it all goes together. And I think what happens is, starting out, a lot of new managers, they're only looking out for themselves, and they want to be authoritarian. And like, there's different, like going back to the leadership conference, there's a lot of different styles of leadership. The most common one that we're all familiar with is like the bad boss that's very authoritarian, but leadership also comes with taking responsibility for things that you didn't do. Like, if someone else on your team made a mistake, maybe that one you'll say, hey, Julianne, like, my bad, like the team, like I'll take that one for the team, even if it wasn't you, it was somebody else, you know, just to save her face. But then you're going to go to her and be like, hey, let's go to coffee. Like, I remember you told me you had a breakup. Like, you know, are you okay? Like, that was a bad mistake. Like, how can I help you so this doesn't happen again? And you know, really building that respect level allows everybody to do better. And also, you know, if there's a mistake on the team, regardless of who did it, hey, can anyone else tell me why we shouldn't do this, and like how we could build a system and process to do things differently the next time something like this arises. So we don't have to get Julianne involved, and like, we can handle it here, and the client never has to know. And it's like collaboration and working together for a common interest. And, you know, I think like that goes a lot further, and it goes all back to relationship building.
Yes, absolutely. It's so true. And I think like you touched on accountability, which is so huge. I think it's something I preach all the time. It's like understand when to just own up to something. Like to your point, even if, I mean, I think 9 times out of 10, it should be done when it's something that you actually did versus like, taking one for somebody else. But that person should feel good to like own up to it too. Like, I think everybody should feel we all make mistakes. Like it's human nature to do that. But I think there's like such a beautiful thing about somebody who's able to just be like, look, I fucked up or I made this mistake. I know that I did that. Like, that's on me. Like, let's talk about how I can fix it or like what I can do to make this change. I think there's so much fear, and maybe it is just like, yeah, a level of fear with like younger employees or maybe like Gen Z, even millennials, I think like that just don't want to like own up to that mistake and just try to deflect and like, oh, well, I didn't know like XYZ or like nobody told me that I needed to do like that or like it's just like I think there's just such something to be said. I think it's so respectable to be like, look, like, yeah, like that's on me. Like, this is what I was thinking, like totally fine to defend yourself and be like, I'm really sorry that happened. This is why I did that. Like, this is my thought process, but like, that's on me. And I think that really does go a long way to just be able to be like, and I think also you need to foster a space where people feel comfortable to do that as well. I think that also is something that goes into it. There's probably lots of places where work where people don't feel comfortable to do that because they're afraid they're going to get fired or demoted or whatever. But I think if you work at an agency where, it's very clear, especially for us at Dialogue, where I've made it very clear that I'm going to provide constructive criticism and I'm going to help you to grow, and I'm going to like try to take those training wheels off and set boundaries, like you said, and make sure that you do have like my support and my availability and my time. But also like understand that mistakes are okay. And that, there is that like level of accountability that needs to happen when it does happen, to be like, this is why it happened, because it's a good learning opportunity. Like you will learn from that 9 times out of 10, in any mistake you make. So I think that's important too.
I think that's part of it. Like what you just said, you give them constructive criticism, not to be mean. I mean, sometimes maybe it is warranted that it's a little harsher because it was a really big mistake, but totally. You generally want them to improve. And I think that's the thing, right? You have to, the whole team does, like, rising tide lifts all boats. Like, you need to give them the constructive criticism so they improve, so the whole team improves, so the project improves. And I think a lot of times managers don't necessarily want their subordinates to get better because then they're threatened. And I think that tends to be a lot of it too. And like, you have to kind of take your ego out of it. And again, it goes to relationships. Like, you want these people that you work day in and day out with to be your friends, and you want to go to happy hours and go to, events with them, and you want to have a good time with them, and not only be about work, because you do respect them and you care about them as a person, but also have the ability to be like, hey, like, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Like, let's do things a little differently this time. So you all get better collectively, but it's hard to set that balance. So what are some of the boundaries that you have, and, maybe that Julianne has with you and that you also then have with your team? Especially when you're out at like events and things, or, having drinks as friends, but also like inevitably work comes up and it's like, okay, like maybe not talk about that right now. Like, what are some boundaries that you have in place?
Yeah, I feel like, I would just try not to like talk about like work or like performance stuff. Like when you're out at happy hour or like drinking or like out at an event or something with your team, like there's a time and a place for that, and people feel more comfortable with liquid courage. I mean, there's alcohol involved, and it's just like that's just inappropriate, I think, time and place. I think lots of like, I remember even at Full Picture, like I would go out with everybody and we would like, just like talk about, it's like therapeutic to go out and talk about work stuff. Like that is naturally what will happen when you go out with your coworkers, is you're going to talk about work. But I would say, not setting that boundary of like, just kind of nipping that in the bud if it comes up, of like, anything related to like performance or somebody else's performance, or, like what's going on at the company in terms of hiring, or like any of that drama stuff, just as a manager. let the coordinators and the managers and whoever else is under you, when they go out on their own to gossip and talk shit and do whatever they want, like that's fine. But yeah, just to not get involved in that as a senior level person. I don't like, and same even with clients. Like when I go out for drinks with clients, like it can get easy to just like fall down this rabbit hole of like gossip, and you're chit chatting and, yapping and doing all the things, and it's fun. But like, I do always like, I'm always monitoring that. I don't ever like get really drunk with like clients or my coworkers or my team. I don't just like, it's just not like what I feel comfortable doing. It's not the same for everybody. There's lots of people that love like going out with their coworkers, and some agencies and brands have like huge parties, and, there's like all of that stuff that goes into that. But I would say, like I just try to make sure that I'm being respectful, again, like that balance of like being very friendly and personable and building a relationship and building a rapport with your clients or with your team members or with your boss, but also just like understanding that there is a little bit of like a relationship barrier there that is different from you just like chit chatting with one of your best friends, where you just kind of have to be a little bit more aware of that line and cautious of that. And, just like kind of always just be aware of it. But I think going out with coworkers, going out with your team, going out with clients, like that's all great. I think that's a really important thing to do, because you are building that relationship outside of the office. But just, always being kind of cognizant of like how much alcohol you're drinking, like if you're getting really drunk, and just knowing kind of when to like either like send yourself home or just like not have those conversations and being confident enough to be like, look, I don't want to talk about this right now. Like, if we want to set up some time next week to like talk about it in the office, we can do that. But like, let's not, discuss it here. It's just like not appropriate.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it is, it's going to happen, but having those internal boundaries with yourself of like, know your role at the company, where that line is for you and how it'll impact you if that line gets crossed. Like preventing it from the start within yourself is important. But you mentioned like something that you said, like, and we talked about this last time, like, not talking to them the way that you would with your best friend. What happens when one of the interns or someone on your team is your best friend from the outside? They just happen to get hired. Or what if like your best friend works on the client side or on the team, like, the opposing side? Like, how do you guys navigate that aspect? Because this industry, it's a very small, everybody knows everybody moves around, agencies, people change jobs constantly. So how do you guys kind of navigate that when you guys are actually really good friends in real life outside of work?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to just like understanding that like there's like, it's just that's the situation, that it's going to be a little bit different than like, your relationship when you're not talking about work, like on a weekend when you're just hanging out, or what your relationship looked like before. Like, I think there's just this level of like respect and understanding. And I think communication is key for that as well. It's like, okay, like if if you're hiring a friend or you're about to work with a friend as a client, like having that conversation of like, you know me, I know you, like we're going to do our best work, but like, let's be honest and let's stay like in close communication about how things are going. And again, like that accountability, if something happens, if like, you make a mistake on the client side and, your client is your friend on the other side, it's like, okay, yeah, we messed up, but here's what we're doing. Like, there's just this level of like respect and like trust and communication that I think runs the gamut in terms of all of these different types of relationships, whether you're like a friend outside of work, or you became friends through your job, or this is your boss that you're hanging out with outside of work, or your direct reports that you're with, like your clients. Like I always think there's just this like understanding that you guys can have this great relationship and be super close, but also know that like, there's that decorum and that level of like respect that has to be there kind of like at all times. I think for friends it's different, because like you guys can, after work, you can just like, chat about it a little bit more openly or honestly. Whereas like maybe in the office, or if you're on like Slack or you're on a client call with like the rest of the team, like if you keep it a little bit more buttoned up. But I think there's a benefit to having clients like as friends, because you can like go to them and be like, hey, like what's actually going on? Like, can you like give me a little insight? Like, do you think this is going to go through? Do you think they're going to resign, or whatever that looks like? Like, there's benefits to being, close with people. There's benefits to being close with your boss and your manager or your direct reports as well. Like, you learn each other's, I think there's better communication. You learn each other's like work style a little bit better. Like, you feel a little bit more comfortable to be like, hey, I didn't like when you did that, or like, this is how I like to be like managed, or this is like, can we talk on Slack versus on text? Cause like, I'm just getting confused with like, there's just ways to set boundaries and barriers.
Knowing where to communicate about what, that's something that I've really had to implement with my client, had to implement it with me and like recently, and I've had to implement it with my assistants, like with my client, like, and even with opposing counsel, we were friends. So it was quick. Like, we would hey, just sent you an email, go check it out. And then we would talk about the email in text, and it's like, wait, no. So we were like, we had to make the boundary of like, let's stop talking about it via text and only communicate via email, because things are getting confused now. I'm screenshotting it, and that's just like too many things back and forth. Clients too, it's like quick one word answer questions can be in the email, in the text, quickly. Yeah. But if it's a substantive thing, put it in the email, put it in Slack, or in my assistants, it's like, put it in like a legitimate communication. Even though nowadays courts do use text messages as like discovery, like it's discoverable and like it is legit. It's not the same. Yeah. And it's just can get messy. Or like with assistants, it's like, instead of sending drafts for approval via text, like using platforms that are built for that. Like, I've started investing in those to make things easier to do edits. Like, I use Rella to manage like all of my law firm social media and podcast social media, because if not, I'm losing all the captions and drafts and like actual like, hey, how are you? How's work? Like actual friendship, like relationship building communications that are arguably just as important, but they're going to get lost. So that's huge of knowing, like, even if they're your best friend, it's like, we can debrief, we can get a drink after this. Like, you guys are going to be at a client dinner, and then it's like, all right, let's go get a drink, just you and I afterwards to debrief, but you're not doing it there while everybody else is like, why are they not talking to us? Like, kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's also like, like when you're texting, like I have great relationships with so many of my clients. So like, we'll text, or like, they'll just be like, hey, can I call you really quick? Like, I want to give you this update. And I'm like, like, give me a call. So we chat. But there's like, when that happens, like, I have to remember, and Julianne and I work on this all the time, because I'm like, okay, great. Like, here's the update. And I just like, we just go forward with it. But I'm like, I have to remember to like put all that in writing, because I have a great relationship with my client and that person. But like, there's like a CEO or like the VP of finance or whoever is on the other side, on the client side, that like wasn't on that call and isn't aware of that. So like, I need to make sure that when things pivot or when things change, or when I have these conversations with my clients, that I'm putting all of that in writing and like getting the whole team on CC so we're all on the same page. So like, the CEO doesn't like lift up his head a month from now and like, he's like, wait, why did we change this whole strategy? Like, our objectives were XYZ. Like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, oh, well, I chatted on the phone with like XYZ like 2 months ago. And he's like, well, so it's a really important, I think, to like make sure that, you are open to like those styles of communication. And like, if Slack is great, then Slack is great and you love it, and that's easy if you want to keep things on email. But like, making sure that you are like being organized and cognizant of the fact that like, your friend and your client, your direct, manager who you work with is like telling you something, but like also making sure that that's, written and so everyone can stay organized too. And like that we're all on the same page, which I think is important too.
Yeah. It's like knowing when things are on the record and when they're not, and when they are on the record, actually making sure they're in the record. And whoever needs to know it knows it. It can get tricky with friends sometimes, or with clients, like when you guys do become friends. And like, I've seen people that, go on to create businesses with their clients and like create companies with their clients, and like, it happens. But having those clear, parameters in place is important. How do you make time for you, though, in an industry that is very much, you're kind of maybe on all the time? Like, there's always events, there's always parties, it's every night you could be out. How do you make time for yourself, for dating, for your family, for your friends outside of work, or even if they are your friends in work, but like your friendship with them outside of anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you said that's a really big pillar of the team at Dialogue and like what Dialogue stands for. Obviously, like Julianne's a mom, like she has, you know, to make time for her family. Like, what are some ways you guys implement like balance, I guess?
Yes. I mean, work-life balance is so huge. And I think like in PR specifically, especially back then, there was this pre-COVID, like when we weren't work from home, there was this like whole culture of like, you needed to be at your desk until like 6:30 every day. Like if the CEO or the boss came around the office at like 5:30 and like nobody was there, like then, you know, they would get upset and like message all the VP. We had to be there. Like, and Julianne has talked about this before too, with her jobs, like in the past, like in corporate America, there was just this like notion that like you needed to sit at your desk and work until like, you know, 6:30 or 7 or whenever you're clocking out, even if you had already finished your work. And like, I didn't know until I joined Dialogue that like there's like another version of that where that's just healthier, where it's like, if you're getting your work done in hours and like working normal working hours and you're really like efficient and productive and you're getting your stuff done, like then wrap up when you want to wrap up. Like, you know, I don't check Slack. I don't monitor who's online when. I think we all have clients. So it's important from an agency perspective that we're available. So I do feel like I'm available like all the time. Like, I mean, I'll put my phone away at night. Like I keep it in another room, like late night when I'm going to bed. But like for the most part, like I will be checking Slack or I will be checking my email like a lot. And that's not something that is like set at Dialogue. Like Julianne preaches the opposite. And we like cement that very firmly with our clients. Like we're not an agency partner that will be available to you 24/7. Like we do our best work when we're like productive within the hours that we're working. And, you know, we're not going to be like, unless it's something really urgent, we're not going to be working on the weekends or like at 8 o'clock at night. Unless again, like it's something urgent that pops up. Like I can count on my hands how many times I've worked on a Saturday since starting at Dialogue. Like it's very few and far between. But I think, yeah, like that work-life balance and that level of trust and like finding and creativity offline is so important at Dialogue. It's something Julianne has implemented. We do these things called creative mornings where once a month on a Tuesday, we're all offline from like 9 to 12. And the whole team goes and does something that inspires creativity. So that could be like going to see a matinee at a movie theater, or it could be like reading the New York Times from start to finish, or it could be listening to a podcast and going for a really long walk, or going to a workout class. Like the sky's the limit. You can do what you want. Obviously, we're not like supporting people like laying out by the pool or like going shopping. Like it needs to be something that's like kind of fueling some sort of inspiration or creativity. But there's this whole like idea of like, we can find creativity and like, I can be super productive even when I'm not sitting at my desk, like writing, typing emails or like building strategies. Like I find inspiration all throughout New York. New York is an incredible city to live in for marketing. I mean, there's marketing that hits you at every street corner, like all the weed posting, all the ads, all the brands, like the pop-up shops. And like, there's just so much that you can like digest that can help me as a creative and as a strategist and as a consultant, like come to the table with really cool and creative ideas for my clients. And I find that to be like one of the most amazing things about Dialogue is that Julianne has created an environment, because it starts from the top. Like Julianne can't be like, hey guys, like work whenever you want. And then she's like checking in to see when people are online and she's working like a dog and she's working 24 hours a day. And like, you know, it has to start from the senior team. And I have always wanted that type of environment. I love the trust and the freedom. Julianne trusts me implicitly to work when I want to work and get my work done when I need to get it done. I spent a summer in Paris last year and I was working like kind of US hours, but like a hybrid. And it was such a testament to like my relationship with Julianne that she trusted me to like be 6 hours ahead in Paris, working from like a city that's like very easy to get distracted and like go off and do things. Like I could have just like kind of fucked around that whole summer and not really done my job. But I have the integrity, and Julianne and I have this relationship and this communication and trust when I knew that I would go there and I would still work really hard. And I knew that I would find like new inspiration and like do really cool things. And Paris would inspire me in like new ways to like do very cool things for Dialogue. I just think like that idea of like, there is so much potential for inspiration and to like work outside of working hours that has been fostered at Dialogue through our creative mornings and just other, you know, initiatives that we do, where it's just, we give this opportunity for people to relax and have that balance. So for me, that balance is great. Like I have a really great, healthy relationship with my job, even though I said like I am online a lot. Like I'm always going to be like kind of available, but that's just how I am. I don't expect that from anyone else in the team. And I don't work really late. Like I'm a morning person, so I like to get up and work early and do all my strategy and all the bigger things that I need to get done early. And then I like to wrap up my days at like 4 or 5 o'clock. Like that's just how it is for me. And
Funny, I'm the opposite. I like my slow mornings. So then I'll work a little later because I really didn't do a whole lot in the morning. That was my time. But it's like the whole point is like finding, like, as long as the work gets done, it doesn't matter how many hours. Like I went to coffee with somebody yesterday and they asked me like it all, especially with like when you're talking to someone in the same industry as you, like I'm sure another PR, like your counterpart at another agency might have that conversation with you, but he's a lawyer and he was like, you know, what's your revenue and like how many hours a week do you work? And he was like, okay, well, if you only work a certain amount of hours a week, like you can't expect to be making more than what you're making. And I was like, that narrative just does not, I'm sorry, but no. And like, also you're a guy, like you might be the one that has to provide for the family and that's great, but like, that's not my MO. Like, I don't need to be making a certain amount of money to be successful. 1, 2, it doesn't matter how many hours I work because it matters. Like my sanity matters more to me than that. And like my clients are going to I'm going to get the work done and they know that. And that's why they're going to come back to me. They're going to pay me what I deserve to be paid because I'm charging my worth and they're going to see that and it's going to work. And again, I want someone to provide for me. I don't want to be to the point where it's like, there's no room for someone else to add something to my life, you know? And I can't be working 100-hour weeks. There's just not going to be time for that. So, you know, maybe my revenue isn't a certain amount, but that's okay with me. Exactly. And I think it goes back to just, you know, as long as the work gets done and you are happy with what you are putting out and you are showing up for you and the people that you said you were going to show up for and you're doing your job, like that's what matters. It doesn't matter how it looks to other people or how it feels to other people, as long as it looks and feels right for you. So I like that your company does a good job of really emphasizing that. And that's something that I struggle with when I do talk to professionals in my industry of like, doesn't have to look the same way that it looks for you. That's okay. That's the whole point of why I did it this way.
Exactly. And like the amount of hours that you're working is not like that doesn't,
I don't know. I've never quantified it, nor do I care to. Right? That estimate that I gave him could have been totally wrong. I don't care.
Right. I don't care either. And I don't care what my team does either. Like for our clients, I have a high level of expectation of like work output for sure. And so does Julianne. Like we do incredible work and I have a very like firm expectation that will continue to remain the same, but I don't care when you're working as long as that work is great. And as long as you're doing like an incredible job. If you want to like take a train at like, you know, 9 or 10 a.m. and like you need to go somewhere and then you want to work after that, that's fine. Like, you know, it's for me, it's more like just getting the stuff done and doing great work and having that trust. I think it goes a really long way. You have to develop and like create that level of trust with your managers before you can just like, you know, like go online whenever you want to. Like, I think there's like a level of that, of course. I think it's easy to do as long as it does come from the top. And I think it is possible to find agencies and managers who like, you know, value that and practice that themselves too, which is great.
For someone who wants to get into this industry, but doesn't really quite know how, or is they're in it and they're looking for the fit, that right agency or brand or company, whatever fit for them, what are some things that you recommend both in the career side, but also on the personal side for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think to find like the culture fit, I would really just ask a lot about the team culture and like what they do, how they foster culture at their agency, what that work-life balance looks like, and like how it's implemented. I think you can really get into more of the concrete with that and try to understand what it looks like. And from a career standpoint, I think like, again, like Julianne fosters this like really incredible like growth plan for everyone at Dialogue, where it's really built around your zone of genius. Like I said, where it's like you can like figure out what drives you, like what fuels you, what you're passionate about. You don't have to like, just because one person is a senior manager on the team that her position might look very different from another senior manager's position on the team because they have different skill sets. Like they are good at different things. We have some girls that are like really incredible strategists. And they love that side of things. They love talking to the clients and leading client calls and doing all this stuff, but they like hate the like negotiation side of things, or they hate like the execution and like the admin stuff, and they're not organized and their brain just doesn't work like that. So they might want to go into like a different kind of like path from the other manager who's like great at building relationships. Like there's just, everyone's different and everyone offers and provides some sort of like, you know, their own unique skill set to a job. And if you work somewhere where you have the opportunity and the freedom to like really figure out what that is, especially as a young person, like discovering what fuels you, what lights you up, what motivates you, what excites you about your work. And then also on the flip side, understanding like what doesn't, like what drains you, what do you procrastinate on, like what can't you get done, like, and then really listening to that, like thinking, why am I procrastinating so much on this? Like, why don't I like to do this? And you will, I mean, not every company will offer you the opportunity to like focus on your zone of genius. Unfortunately, I think that's how it should be. But like, you know, there are ways that you can advocate for yourself. And I think once you do understand what does fuel you, what does light you up, then you can really try to find positions that will foster that, you know, in any industry, really, depending on what it is that you love to do, is like really listening to yourself and learning and growing and understanding, like, you know, what the things that you're good at. And then there are some instances where there's something that you're really good at that doesn't really excite you, but you know, you're good at it. So there's like, it's a nuanced thing. But, you know, just listening to that and trying to do work, or at least like advocate for yourself in interviews where, you know, you're really good at something. Like is how I got this job at Dialogue, where, you know, I advocated and like knew that this type of conversation and like, building relationships and I loved being on the agency side because I love having clients and nurturing those relationships, and I love influencers and I love the space and I'm really excited about it and I'm very creative, and I like talked all about that in my interview versus like, you know, just like highlighting everything that's on my resume is more of a conversation. I think goes a long way as well.
Yeah, I love that. Like you said, like, yeah, not everywhere can you do that, but I like when companies really want to build someone up, and like a manager specifically takes interest in each of their people and tries to find what works for them. And like, okay, I'm going to give you more of that, and I'm going to give this person more of what maybe the first person's not good at, and like really building your team that way. And it's like the entrepreneurship within a company, you know, of built like hiring for strengths and hiring for weaknesses, and building up each of person's the two of them, and really, you know, building a team that's collaborative. I think that like I do wish more companies thought that way, and that is my hope too for people, especially in these more creative fields. Like, you know, everybody wants to be in this world now. It's about finding how you best can use the skills that you have, and your interests and your passions, and combine all of that to be the best asset for whoever your client or your team is, and produce the best work possible, and hopefully that you enjoy what you do in the process.
Exactly.
But this has been so great, Sophie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's at Sophina with 2 A's at the end, SOPHINAA. And then Dialogue is at Dialogue NYC. We have lots of client updates there, all of our client roster. You can look at us on the website. And I have a LinkedIn as well. Sophie O'Rourke is my name. You can like pop that in. But it was so great chatting with you, Kayla. I like loved this conversation so much. It was so fun. Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Yeah. One last question. What is something that you're most looking forward to at Dialogue right now? Like any projects you guys working on?
Yeah, we're working on so many like fun projects for the fall and into the next year. I think what I'm most excited about is just like kind of this like new business invigoration, like focusing more on this fall of like, looking at like what other brands are doing out there and like what we can do to support them from a brand, like current brand standpoint. We just wrapped up this like really fun campaign with Little Spoon, which is a DTC baby food brand. They launched this massive transparency campaign where they shared their test results of heavy metals and toxins in their baby food to meet the EU standards, because the US has terrible, terrible standards on safety regulations and toxins in our baby food, which is really sad and really scary. So they matched the EU standards and they released all of their test results, and they will continue to do that for all of their new launches. So we hosted this like huge, created this huge campaign around it. We worked with like tastemakers and influencers and experts, and we had Megan Roop do a workout class with Eden Grinchpan and Emily DiDonato and some other like very powerhouse women, female moms and entrepreneurs. And it was this big panel about like the importance of transparency with baby food brands and just being a mom. And it was like a very empowering panel and workout class and moment. And then we coupled that with like a big social push as well. And it's just amazing to see, you know, like brands that are really striving to be the first and to do more for the consumer. And Little Spoon has always been at the forefront of that. And, you know, working with like the geniuses on that team is just, it's an incredible opportunity. They come to us with these like amazing ideas and we're like, okay, great. Like we work together to develop these like really cool campaigns to drive impact. And I think that one was really important just because that is so important. My little sister is a new mom and her baby Henry is just now starting solid. So we've given him Little Spoon, and I just love to know that like, you know, he's eating the healthiest and the best and freshest food, and that he's not, you know, eating foods that have heavy metals and toxins in them. And it's just an important conversation. And that campaign was just like really impactful and exciting. And my team did such an incredible job bringing that to life. It was really fun. So I love like very creative and campaigns that aren't your standard, just like, hey, here's like here's the new launch. Here's what we want to do. Like we want to build stories and tell stories and create these like really impactful moments for our brands that break through social noise. Because I mean, I could talk about influencer all day, but like it's such a saturated industry. It's such a saturated space. So what we do is very focused on building campaigns and building creative storytelling moments that hit like in kind and gifting, and work with tastemakers and experts and do like activations and like work with the PR and the social teams and like create these big splashy moments that, you know, are very personalized and very creative and very intentional. And that's really how you drive impact is like really kind of nurturing these larger moments and making sure that we're telling a story that resonates and that's authentic and that feels, you know, important to the people that are speaking to it. So the creators that we work with are going to be very like curated very specifically. And, you know, we want to make sure it's always super authentic, and that type of campaign just like really means a lot, I think, in terms of just making sure that it's more transparent, and getting people to know that Little Spoon is doing that, doing this like very big, exciting thing. So we just wrapped with that push, and it was a fun one for everybody. But I'm sure everyone on the team, including Little Spoon, is happy that it's over and that we can kind of take a breath and get back to business.
Yeah. See, like that's going back to like what I said, like in a past life, like, or in another life, like this is like the stuff that I would love to do. Like that to me, those are the kind of clients I want to work with too. Like I want to be a part of that, whether it's me being on the influencers legal team negotiating against you, you know, to get that contract signed so they can be a part of this campaign, or working with you guys to find the influencers and you know, create those contracts to send to the influencers. Like that's the stuff that excites me and lights me up. But like the creative side of it, I have it in me. It's not I don't use it as much as I sometimes wish I could, but it's not my nature. But like, I want to, like, I love like everything you just said. I'm like, oh, I want to be like a fly on the wall in those conversations. Like that to me is so fascinating.
It's
like,
so fun.
That's the one thing I wish I lived in New York for, is like to go to these events.
Yeah,
I know Miami has them, but they're still a little bit more on the exclusive side. I'm like, I want to get to that level where I'm like a part of those rooms, even if I'm like the boring lawyer. Like I still want to be a part of it.
No, for sure. They're so fun. It's just so, and like it's crazy that those start with just like a conversation in a conference room. Like we just get in a room, the full team, and where we get on a call with our client, we're like, okay, this is what we're doing. And then we just have these like crazy brainstorms where we just like throw shit at the wall to see what sticks, and like no idea is a bad idea. And then you can develop these like incredible campaigns, and like it's just so creative. And that's really what I felt like I was missing in PR, and what I like truly love about this industry is that it's like there's so much potential, and there's so much untapped potential. There's so many things that we can be doing that like are not what our competitors are doing. That's like, it's such a creative space and it's constantly changing. It's so fun and so fascinating to me. And I think that's why, like, you know, I love what I do, is because I love that space and I love that industry, and in creating campaigns and moments like that. It's just so cool and so inspiring.
Yeah. It's like we talked about this on the first call too, but it's like Emily in Paris, like sometimes the way that things kind of, you're like, that's not actually how it happens, but sometimes it kind of is. Like, it really is just a fly on the wall, like, idea. It's like, I don't think this is going to work, but like, why not? Yeah. And that ends up being like the winning moment. And like, that to me is so freaking cool.
I know. I love it. Especially when someone's idea, like a coordinator or an intern throws something out and we end up going with it. I'm like, you should be so proud of yourself that like, and it's so cool to watch that like journey from like just like a little idea that gets thrown out in a brainstorm in a conference room to like becoming this like massive, like, you know, national campaign push. It's so rewarding. And I remember the first time that happened for me, it was like, this is so cool. Like my little idea is just like out in the world right now. And it's amazing. It's such a like a validating.
It's what it is, like advocating for yourself and not, you know, no question is a stupid question. No idea is stupid. You know, maybe how you present it or asking it multiple times, that's a different story, but like, it's okay to put yourself out there and, you know, you never know where it'll lead, but this has been so fun. Thank you so much again. And hopefully next time I'm in New York, we get to meet. I know Megan and I are going to try to see each other for the holidays, but
yes, please do. So if you ever come to New York, I would love to meet IRL and just continue yapping away. It's been so fun.
Yeah, we've literally been here for 2 hours, guys. We got to go, but like, we could stay for so much longer.
Yeah, I know. It's fine. Everything's fine. Stay here all day.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.